As a newer therapist or someone who's going to be moving into the therapy room with clients, you may be wondering what interventions, what terminology, like what do I need to know before I really sit down and start doing therapy with clients? And there's a lot to know, but you don't need to know it all. And I recently saw a newer therapist in a therapist group for other therapists supporting one another, asking this very question and saying, what do I really need to know before I start sitting down and doing therapy with clients? And there was a lot of responses. And so I wanted to go through some of those responses today and also give you a list of things that I think you need to know as well to hopefully give you an idea of where you need to begin and where maybe you need to focus if you're not familiar with these terms to give yourself the best possible running start when it comes to being a new therapist. And spoiler alert, you don't need to know all of this, but I do think that there's a lot of things on this list that really are helpful for you to know. So just keep in mind what you don't know or things that maybe you need to brush up on or you need to become more familiar with to help you grow your skill set. We are all constantly learning and growing as therapists. And so it's okay if you don't know all of these, but I do think that this really is a good list of kind of the bread and butter of what you need to know in order to be successful in your work with therapy clients. Okay, so this post specifically was saying, what are some key interventions and terms that new therapists should know backwards and forwards before sitting down with clients? Such a good question. Again, lots of responses here. So I'm gonna go through them and then I'm gonna give you my take on them as well. And I'm gonna add some things to this list. One of the responses that kept coming up in this post was just you being familiar with common terminology and understanding the actual factual definition. I don't know about you, but there is a lot of information about mental health online, which can be great, but there's also a lot of misinformation where people are misusing really common terminology. These terms like boundaries and gaslighting and codependency and addiction, they are used so much online and sometimes they're misused, they're not used correctly. So a lot of the responses were saying just being able to provide some psychoeducation on common terminology and you knowing what they actually are can be really helpful, which I definitely agree with, because if you have someone that's coming in and they feel very strongly that they're being gaslit, one, I would want to make sure that I know what that actually means. And then two, I would want to make sure that I know what they think that means, because if they're not accurate, I want to be able to provide some psychoeducation about that. Someone else said learning to be comfortable in silence, which that's a big one. I definitely think that that's something that takes a lot of practice and time. It's okay if you're not good at that from the get-go, but I do think that being able to sit in silence and utilize it to your benefit versus trying to fill that space can be a really helpful intervention to know how to do. And I would elaborate even further on that and say, really, when it comes to your interventions, you being able to know basic motivational interviewing techniques is at its core some of the best things that you can know before going into work with therapy clients. Now, for you, if you don't know what this is, motivational interviewing is a concept where we want to stay client-centered and we want to collaborate with the client and we want to make sure that our discussions, our interventions, the wording that we're using all fosters a sense of connection, collaboration, and client-centeredness. And so what I mean by that is questions should be open-ended. We should have positive, unconditional regard. We should be empathetic. We should be compassionate. We should also give positive affirmations. We should be able to do self-reflection. We should be able to utilize reflective listening to help the client feel safe and supported in talking to us. I think that is really at the heart of everything else that can happen in therapy, because therapy is heavily based off of the relationship or rapport that you build with a client. If you guys don't have a good relationship, then it doesn't matter what interventions you try, they're not going to be effective. So being able to really focus on the relationship and the rapport building while utilizing motivational interviewing, being compassionate, utilizing unconditional positive regard, all of those things, if you know nothing else and you just do those, I am confident that therapy will be successful for you, because clients will feel safe and comfortable and supported when talking to you, which is a huge piece to whether or not that you're gonna feel like the therapy is effective. Someone said cultural competence, cultural humility, intersectionality, and the ability to just listen. Very true, all good things to know. Someone else said active listening, actively engaging in clients' discussions and being able to ask them thoughtful questions while giving them the space to feel, talk about, or go off in whatever direction they need to, which I think is also really helpful, because if you are trying to guide the session in a certain way, you're asking closed-ended questions versus those open-ended questions, then it is going to change the course of therapy, and that could potentially cause the client to have some feelings about that. They might not like that. They might feel like that they can't talk or express certain things. They might feel like that they're not really able to utilize the session to the way that they want to. So being able to just let it go in whatever direction it needs to, while still trying to stay actively listening and present and reverting it back to their goals, I think is definitely a great skill to know. Someone else said, never work harder than your client. If you're looking for a solution and it feels like dragging them along, stop and explore feelings. That is another really important thing to know. I see a lot of new therapists really working harder than the client. And I even see seasoned therapists going, why am I so frustrated at this client? And after we talk about it, we find out that it's because they are doing so many things for the client and they're working harder than the client, and they're feeling frustrated, and they're meeting a wall because they're working hard and yet they can't make change for the client. The client has to do that themselves. And so I think that is so important to be mindful of and to remember, is that you want to show up and work with the client, but don't work harder than the client, because that's not going to be helpful for either of you. They need to be the one in the driver's seat. Someone else said, stay curious and let them give you as much information as possible to avoid making the wrong conclusion. I love that. I think it's very easy to hear someone say something and be like, oh, I think I know what they mean. And you might, and you might be really, really wrong. And it's not because you weren't listening or you weren't paying attention, but we all are looking at things from our own perspective. And so if they're telling us something, we're looking at it from our perspective, not theirs. And we have to actively try to put ourselves in their shoes and go, what do they need? What do they mean? How can I support them? Because it's, again, client-centered. So being quick to assume or to just act like that you know and you understand could really limit you in that therapy space. And so I agree with this person. Stay curious and ask questions to help explore and clarify things, to get as much information as possible before moving on to the next piece or intervention that you're going to use, which might look like, okay, here are some strategies, here we can help cope, we might need to challenge negative thinking, what have you. Like, don't jump to the task, really stay in the feels as much as possible, which is another really important intervention and tip to know, is don't try to go in there and just try to fix it. Give space for things to unfold. Allow people time to properly emote and process and work through things and talk about things out loud. If you come at it from a quick, we need to hurry up and fix it mode, that might not be what the client wants. And you also might miss things because you're jumping straight to the finish line when we really need to do all the other work before we can get to the, okay, so what do we do about all of this piece? Another person said how to create a safe environment for the client. I talked a little bit about that earlier. And the next one said the magic is in the relationship. Again, I hit on both of these a minute ago, but it's so true. When people are asked about their therapy experience and whether a therapy experience was helpful, research shows that the relationship between the client and the therapist has more to do with their perception of whether or not therapy was helpful than what interventions and strategies and modalities the therapist was actually utilizing in the session. Now, that doesn't mean that those things aren't important, because they really, really are. But if you have a strong therapeutic working relationship with the client, everything else is possible. And you don't have to know everything. As long as you have that solid, supportive relationship, anything can come from that. Because people come into therapy for a lot of reasons, but at the core, people want to feel heard. They want to feel understood. They want validation that they're not alone, that they're not going crazy, that these things are important and valuable, and they should be concerned about them, and they should be able to talk about them and to express things and to feel how they're feeling, which all comes from a relationship standpoint and not the standpoint of do this, do that, here's this therapeutic skill, what have you. It's coming from a relational perspective, and the safety and security that they feel in order to do all of those things, to emote, to process, to feel like that they're less alone. And if that's all that happens, just that solid safety of a relationship, and nothing else takes place, there's still going to be positive outcomes because of that. Now, it's not going to be the same if you're, just stopping there and not having the ability to get into the nitty-gritty and really work on things and try interventions and different strategies, but that relationship is key. Someone else said, nothing works unless you do the work. One of the biggest lessons for my clients is that the changes that they make outside the office will have the biggest impact. That is so key. Even being able just to articulate that to clients and say, listen, let's talk about what you can do outside of session to incorporate what we're doing in session and make the most out of our time can be a great intervention to do. And also to keep in mind for yourself of, we only have X amount of time, probably less than an hour. So I don't need to worry about doing it all in that hour. I need to make sure that I'm coming at this from a place where I'm supportive, again, active listening, and I'm helping give them the tools that they need to make that change, and then positively enforcing them doing the work. And if they're not able to do the work, another intervention I would add is being able to confront resistance, lack of follow through, people not following the things that they said that they were going to do or trying the interventions they said they were going to try, and being able to effectively navigate those conversations and confront those things in an assertive and respectful way so that they can really have a place to talk about why that is and have accountability. And another piece I would add to that is you also just being able to model good, healthy communication, boundaries, and relationship dynamics. A lot of clients come to therapy and they have had really shitty situations, really unhealthy relationships. They might still be in those unhealthy relationships. And there might be a lot of things that they're dealing with as a result of that. So being able to model and show what a good, healthy, supportive relationship dynamic looks like, and to provide a corrective experience in that way for some people who may have only ever felt unheard, invalidated, not important in their lives, is a huge intervention and strategy to know how to do as a therapist. And it really just starts with you being empathetic and you modeling healthy relationship communication, dynamics, and boundaries. Someone else said, the number one indicator of therapeutic success is the relationship between the therapist and the client, like I just said. And then they go on to say, enough cannot be said for the intersubjective space between you and your client. Try not to get caught up in the techniques and modalities more than you are plugged into that intersubjective space. So true. Absolutely. I have nothing to add. That's a great way to put it. Someone else said, the best intervention is always to be able to connect with your client. So make sure that you are taking care of yourself, remaining open to connecting, and everything else you will figure out along the way. Yes, absolutely. Being able to connect with your client and also to navigate any ruptures that might occur so you guys can stay connected and keep working on building a good, healthy relationship is key. Everything else can flow from that, but nothing can flow if those things aren't stable and secure and you guys don't have a good foundation for a relationship. So I agree. It's less about all these therapeutic modalities and techniques and interventions. I mean, all those things are great, but it's the relationship. It is the ability to talk with somebody, to see somebody, to not just be sympathetic, but be empathetic, to put yourself in their shoes, to be non-judgmental, to manage your own biases, to look at someone with love and compassion and understanding and care, and being able to model good, healthy relationship dynamics so that they feel seen, cared for, heard, accepted, appreciated, so that they feel like that they can tell you and work through all the shit that's bringing them to therapy to begin with. Someone else said, maintaining your own emotional regulation in sessions at all times, including your boundaries. I agree with this so much. There was some other comments in here about knowing specific modalities, knowing what your theoretical orientation is, knowing how to do some of the back end stuff, like staying up to date on notes and continuing education and making a treatment plan and lots of other really good things, which I agree. I think they're all helpful. But the thing that really sticks out here is you being able to take care of yourself and know how to do that so that you can show up as best as you can for the client. You can know all the best up-to-date information on therapeutic techniques and modalities. You can be EMDR trained, you can be a DBT specialist, you can do all these things. But at the core, foundationally, if you don't have the ability to have a good working relationship with someone, you don't know how to take care of yourself so that you can show up and be 100% and be the person who is attuning and listening and validating and encouraging and not being biased, then nothing else can be built off of that. The foundational blocks are being able to have good, positive, unconditional regard, to be empathetic, to put yourself in another person's shoes, the relationship, and you being healthy enough to be in that relationship and model good behavior really is key, and everything else can just flow from that. And you have time to learn all those things. You don't need to know all of them before you go to your first session with a client. But I do agree with the majority of people on this post saying you really need to know how to show up and be healthy, supportive, compassionate, kind, understanding, non-biased, non-judgmental. You need to show up and just be a good human. And if you can do that and you check your shit at the door and you acknowledge and accept what you don't know and you're willing to work on it, everything else will come with time. I'm genuinely curious at this point if there's anything that you would add and what your thoughts are and what your take is. And also, if you are a new therapist and you're like, I'm still really struggling, let me know in the comments below as well so that we can all support you. And as always, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe and follow along so that you never miss any videos that I post. And until next time, bye.